Republicans in the U.S. state of Wyoming have voted to remove Liz Cheney from Congress in a decisive defeat for one of Donald Trump's fiercest critics. Let's bring in Arise U.S. correspondent Eric Ham, who joins us from Washington. Eric, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. Let's start with the significance of Liz Cheney losing her Wyoming primary and what it means for the Republican Party.
Well, let's just think about this for a second. 2 years ago, Liz Cheney won in a state that Donald Trump won by the biggest margin of any state that he won in 2020. She won with 73% of the vote. That's a landslide. And here we are just 2 years later, and she loses by a landslide, by more than 30 points. And we're talking about a House seat where in Wyoming, there's only one House seat because the state is so small. And Liz Cheney represented that state for quite some time. But even before Liz Cheney represented that state, her father, the former two-term vice president, represented the state. In fact, it's where he got his start in politics. So the Cheney name is legendary in that state. But what we saw last night was just how strong the Trump influence is on the Republican Party now, that you had a Cheney who represented the state of Wyoming for decades, and Liz Cheney, who just won that state 2 years ago by 73%, losing in a landslide because Donald Trump made the decision that she should no longer be in office. And by the way, of the 10 Republicans who voted for impeachment of Donald Trump in 2020, 8 of those 10 Republicans will not be in Congress in 2023. Again, this is all through the power of Donald Trump. 4 retired to stave off either running or dealing with Republicans, and 4 actually lost their seats. Liz Cheney is the latest to actually lose her seat in that race last night as a result of her defiance, not only of the Republican Party, but of Donald Trump.
Very interesting, Eric. Now, in her concession speech, she hinted that she is certainly not finished in politics. So what does the future hold for her?
Absolutely not. She's not finished. In fact, she gave an interview just this morning where she talked about this, and she was pointedly asked, is she going to run for president? And she said she would not make a decision right now, but she did say she is thinking about what her next steps will be. We're also learning, and this is some breaking news that we just got, she has actually filed a new PAC titled The Great Task. So we don't know what that means, but she talked about the great task in her concession speech last night. And so what we do know is that she has more than $10 million still left in her congressional campaign budget that she can use to fund potential candidates who actually do not believe in what she is calling the big lie that Donald Trump actually won the presidency in 2020. So what we do know is that Liz Cheney is still going to be a force in politics. The question is, will she be running to unseat or to stop Donald Trump in 2024, or will she be using her valuable influence and resources to ensure that other candidates also move against and away from the former president and not with the former president?
So what more can you tell us about the newcomer, Harriet Ageman?
Well, this is very interesting because if we go back to 2016, she was actually someone who was running, who was actually attempting to try to stop Donald Trump from actually getting the Republican presidential nomination. She, in fact, stood against him on the floor of the nominating convention in Pennsylvania in 2016 to try to stop him from becoming the presidential nominee and ultimately the president of the United States. Fast forward to 2022, and here she is steadfast standing with the president saying that the election was stolen, that Donald Trump is still the president of the United States, and therefore he should be in office. And that's what her biggest crux was and what she was running on in this race. Interestingly enough, what we saw in this race in Wyoming was that Liz Cheney was not even running against Haberman in this race. Much of her ire, much of her focus was actually on Donald Trump, not on many of the big issues that are right now confronting the nation. namely climate change and, of course, the war in Ukraine. Much of this race focused and centered on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump came out the winner last night.
Well, Eric, one thing that stood out for me was some of the lawmakers' reactions to Cheney's loss with the "girl bye" statements. I'm just wondering if you can tell us more about that.
Liz Cheney certainly made this race about little girls. She also made this race about the future of the Republican Party, and certainly that was an issue. And of course, we saw just how far she has fallen. Again, if we go back just a few months ago, Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, someone that Liz Cheney served in leadership of the House of Representatives, was actually in the state holding a fundraiser against her. And so what we have seen is she has lost all of her allies. She has lost all of her support in the Republican Party. And here it is. This is someone who is standing on an island. And now today, many revere her as someone with morals, someone as a hero. And again, what we continue to see is this is the lone woman standing up against a party, an individual that not only controls the party, but many believe could potentially control the country in less than 2 years.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us and for the discussion this afternoon, Eric Ham.